Welcome to another episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Allen, and as always, stoked to be with you here today, diving into some uncomfortable topics. So, what are we talking about today? Essentially, we're going to be breaking down what is the uncomfortable? What does that mean when we say we're going to dive into the uncomfortable? And we're also going to touch on the name behind, or the origin behind the name. Where did this come from? Where did this name come from? And the inspiration behind it. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, starting with how did Into the Uncomfortable get its name? So I have a video up on my Instagram account that you can watch. I posted it a few weeks ago. Really, it's just diving in. It briefly touches on this, but I want to dive even further into where did this name come from? And what's the inspiration behind it? Why is it so special? Why is it so important? So essentially, I came up with this name. A lot of the inspiration came from a song, but more on that in a second. First, I just knew that the uncomfortable was where I wanted to go with this. I knew that I wanted to take this in that direction. And so originally when I had, decided to take the leap, I made the decision. I said, okay, I'm going to start this blog. I'm going to start this. I'm going to go for it. This is what's happening. When I made that decision, I knew it was going to have something to do with getting uncomfortable because it was such an uncomfortable thing for me, right? So I already knew that was kind of the direction I was going to go. I just wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do and what I was going to call it. I started looking at things just like the Uncomfortable blog or like Get Uncomfortable or stuff along those lines. Some of those domain names were taken. Some of them I just wasn't, in my head it sounded great. And then when I started to put it on paper, I wasn't huge on it. And so I can remember I was sitting at a coffee shop with, as I mentioned on a couple episodes, I talked about how I was building this thing as I'm with all my friends, I'm with my girlfriend, and we're working on, they're working on homework, and I'm working on building this. I'm working on building this blog and building this platform and creating a website and whatever. And I remember being at this coffee shop while they're all working on homework. I'm sure I had homework I was supposed to be doing, but I was working on this and sitting there trying to think of a name, trying to think of what should I call this thing. And then I was listening to a song. It's called Doin' Me by Mikey Mike. And this is a song I'd listened to many times before. It's a good song. But the song in it, he says, it's like the whole song is very conversational. And essentially in the song, it's like he's having a conversation with his mom. And in it, his mom asks him, she's like, well, but Mike, don't you want to be comfortable? Like, isn't that what you want? Don't you want comfort in life? And he goes, no. It's like, no, Mom, I don't want to be comfortable. I want to be uncomfortable. I want to be scared out of my head and lost out of my mind. I want to fall in love a few thousand times. And so I'm like, wow, that really resonates. And I've heard, like I said, this is a song. This wasn't the first time I heard the song. But for some reason, as I heard that, it just really resonated. And especially just where I was at in life at that time and the decisions I was going through. And I was struggling trying to make this decision to drop out of school because it's scary. It's very against what, the norms of society are. And there was other factors involved too. The girl I was dating, I was like, I don't know if I drop out, are we going to still be able to keep dating? Are we going to be able to, stick this out together? Fortunately, thank God we're married now. So I would say it worked out. But anyways, there was just that's just to say that there was a lot going on at that time. And there was a lot bouncing around in my head. And I was scared out of my head. I at times felt like I was losing my mind. And so that's part really resonated. But I was like, I would so much rather be terrified and run at fear than to sit in comfort. Because that's how you live an extraordinary life. And so as I'm sitting there at this coffee shop, listening to these words and listening to this song and working on all of this, trying to decide what I'm going to, name this platform that I'm creating, I go down a rabbit hole and get distracted because I like this kind of stuff. And so I go to genius.com, the Genius lyrics, and I look up the song Doing Me by Mikey Mike. And then I put, I'm sitting there looking through it. And if you don't know, if you've never looked at this website before, essentially what it'll do is it'll take lyrics and it'll break them down, and it will take those lyrics and it'll show you like what the meaning behind it, whether it was like something the artist broke down at some point in an interview, or whether it's just someone else's take on it. Whatever, it'll break that down and it'll kind of explain more in depth what it's talking about. I was like, all right, I want to see more of this. I want to dive more into what he's talking about here. What does this mean? And in it, it's talking about just living this uncomfortable life. And it's talking about getting uncomfortable and going into the uncomfortable. And that's when a spark just clicked in my brain. And I was like, into the uncomfortable. That's it. Like, I was like, that's it. That's the name. I immediately, in this manic state, I'm just like typing into my computer. I'm just like going to Google domains, looking it up, type it in into theuncomfortable.com. Boom, it's available for like $12 a month. I was like, yeah, okay, right there on the spot. I bought the domain. Well, so then I buy this domain. I have my name. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that's done. Check that off the list. We got that set. And this is going back to episodes, I believe it was 2 and 3, when I broke them into 2 different parts. And, we talked about the story of Into the Uncomfortable. And this is sort of right in between, when I decided I was going to drop out and I was going to start this thing. And then when I hit publish on the first blog post, just so you kind of have a little background and know where we're at, what we're talking about, and, sort of where we are in the whole Graham story. Anyways, so I'm at this point. I find myself here and I'm like, okay, I've got my name, domain is bought. We're good. All right, now what? What do I do now? And so really having that whole, and that's what leads into what we talked about in part 2, where I hit publish on the first blog post and all of that. And so if you haven't listened to that, go check that out. It was episode number 3. We dove deeper into that. But for the time being, for the rest of us, let's sort of dive more into, okay, real quick. So when I bought that domain name, that is really what pushed me forward more. And so that's just one quick note. Just this is kind of a rival hole sidestep thing, whatever. But essentially, when I bought that domain name and when I made that decision and said, okay, look, this is the name, this is what's happening, that propelled me that much more forward. So sometimes it does take a little monetary investment. It takes really actually putting something into this to really help you move forward. So if there's something you're looking to start, which we are going to talk more about at the end of this episode and next week, just that's something to just keep in mind, because that's something that really helped push me forward more and really commit me once I made that investment and once I invested into a site builder and that sort of thing. But anyways, like I said, that was just kind of a sidestep rabbit hole, but I just wanted to make sure I touched on that. Anyways, so backing up a little bit, why uncomfortable in the first place? Why does uncomfortable even matter? What was the point of that? Why did I even want that name to begin with? Why not literally anything else? And the reason is because in order to live a fulfilled life, we need to live an uncomfortable life. There's a saying that basically along the lines of it says, let me get it right. Easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life. So essentially what that means is that when we're making the easy choices and we're taking the route of comfort and we're taking the easy way out, that's going to end up leading us to a harder life in the end, right? So what would be a good example of this? Okay, here. So think about if you were to eat junk food all the time. That might be the easier choice, right? It's for sure going to be more enjoyable in the moment. You're going to get that nice dopamine rush from all that sugar. It's going to feel good in the moment, but it's going to lead to a much harder life with health complications, weight struggles, which is going to lead to body image struggles, which is going to lead to mental struggles, right? So that's a weird example, I feel like, but essentially the point is when we make the easy choices, that's going to give us a harder life versus on the flip side of that, when we're making the harder choices to maybe do the things to take care of ourselves, to do the things to build ourselves up, to grow ourselves, that's going to lead to a much easier life, though it's not the easier choice in the moment, oftentimes. So that's just what we got to keep in mind as we're going through this is as we go through life, is that The easy choices are always going to be more flattering, and that is the comfortable. They're more flattering in the moment because oftentimes when we're making a decision and we're trying to make these choices, we're looking at just the choice itself at face value, and we're not looking at the result, what's on the other side of that choice. And that's where it gets us. That's where we fail. That's where we fall because we're looking at the wrong thing. If instead we can look at the result and we can look at the outcome over just that initial choice, that initial decision, then we're gonna choose the uncomfortable pretty much every time. That's just the reality of it. And we talked about last week how we talked about three different ways comfort's killing your dreams, and one of those things was that comfort is killing your happiness, right? So why? We talked about because you're chasing that short dopamine rush. You're chasing that in that moment, what feels good, what's nice, what's easy. For example, have you ever, I don't know why I keep going back to this example, but say in the moment you have a craving for something sweet. For me, last week I gave the example of a milkshake. I love a milkshake, but milkshakes don't love me. All right. Lactose does not love me. So that might be fun in the moment. That might be enjoyable in the moment. But later on, I'm going to pay for it. Right. And it's the same thing. So maybe, whatever it is in your life, and it doesn't have to be junk food, even though that's for some reason the only example I seem to want to go to right now. Whatever it may be in your life, you're taking these easy choices. You're choosing, you know what? I'll work out tomorrow. It's all good. It's all good. And what happens? That keeps happening. And then you don't ever make it there. You're choosing the comfortable instead of the uncomfortable. I firmly believe that a bad workout is way better than doing nothing at all. And like I've said before, rest is important. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those times that you need to go do that, but you choose not to. Not out of intentionality of choosing to rest, but out of choosing the comfort instead. That's two very different things. And when we choose the comfort instead, this impacts our mental health. This impacts obviously our physical health. This impacts just man, it's so impactful because when we are choosing comfort, we're settling for mediocrity. And like I said a couple of weeks ago, you can't be extraordinary if you're not willing to step out of the ordinary. And that's just the reality. And so that essentially is why I wanted uncomfortable, because the reality is you're never going to achieve your dreams. You're never going to achieve that fulfillment in life, true fulfillment. You're never going to feel the fullness of life and really experience that if you're not willing to take that step out of your comfort zone. If you're not willing to get uncomfortable. And that's so yeah. Basically that was my motive behind picking uncomfortable and that word specific, because I believe so firmly in this, and I believe so firmly in the fact that we have to break out of these comfort zones and we have to destroy comfort. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is how we find that fulfillment in life. That's how we get to where we want to be. That's how we achieve our dreams. No one ever became great by just saying comfortable. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, sorry. None of these legends, whoever it is, Tom Brady, freaking whoever, I don't care. Whoever sports, I feel like is a good example for this. I'm not even a huge sports guy, but I feel like it's a good example. Whatever, regardless, whoever it is that maybe you look up to, whoever you consider a legend, one of the greats, these people did not become legends. These people did not become masters of their crafts by choosing the comfortable. They chose to get uncomfortable. They chose to put in the hours when no one else was willing to. They chose to push themselves past their limits. They chose to fight when it was hard. And when they got knocked down, They were able to get back up again because they built that resilience we talked about last week. They were able to get back up again because they were no stranger to the uncomfort. They were no stranger to the uncomfortable and to the discomfort because they had been diving into those comfort zones. They had been pushing their limits. That's what we got to do. We got to get uncomfortable. And we got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And when you realize this, when you tap into that mentality and when you're able to really see that is the reason I chose the uncomfortable. And that's the reason that I'm so passionate about the uncomfortable. And that was so important to me, is because it clicked one day. I don't want to be comfortable. I don't want to live this comfortable, normal, average, basic life. That's not me. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And that's not who I'm ever going to be, because I'm not going to let myself. The times I have struggled the most in my life, and I've told y'all before, I haven't dove into it deep yet because it's not something I'm really ready to dive into yet. But essentially, I've told y'all before that I struggle with a lot of mental health stuff, a lot of anxiety. I've struggled with depression, all that sort of stuff. But essentially, when it's been the worst for me is when I've been choosing the more comfortable path, and when I've not been willing to push myself and push myself past, I shouldn't say past my limits, but you know what I mean? Step out of my comfort zone and do things to take care of myself. I mean, that's another reason I'm so passionate about self-care. If you follow me on Instagram, you hear me talk about that a fair amount. And I do my little self-care Sunday series on Instagram at Any of the Uncomfortable. But anyways, that's the reason I'm so passionate about it, was because it really can be uncomfortable, especially when we don't feel like it. And maybe when we're down on ourselves, it's really hard to take care of ourselves because it's really uncomfortable. But anyways, this is getting all over the place. Just got a lot on my mind. And yeah, I mean, honestly though, it's all on topic, because we're diving into what really the uncomfortable means. And that's what it means. It means to do the things to push yourself, to step out of your comfort zone, to push the bounds of comfort so that you can live a fulfilled, happy life. You deserve better than average. You deserve better than mediocrity. You deserve better than a life full of comfort. You deserve a fulfilled life. You deserve to be happy, and you deserve to step into the fullest extent of your calling. You've been given a calling for a reason. You've been given the passions that are in you for a reason. And what a shame it would be for you to waste that. What a shame it would be for you to wind up on your deathbed one day and never have stepped into it, because instead you chose the arms of comfort. Like I've said before, in every decision we make, we get to choose the comfortable or the uncomfortable. It's a decision we make countless times a day, and it's up to us to decide. So with that, I want to transition into how can you get more uncomfortable? How can you, the listener, take what I'm saying about the uncomfortable and take what we know about getting uncomfortable and apply that to your life? Now, dude, I could talk about this forever, so I'm going to keep it pretty brief and pretty simple. First step is pretty much going to be self-awareness. And it's pretty much just going to be paying attention. In the last episode, we talked about, like I said, the three reasons comfort's killing your dreams. And then I talk about how it's important to be able to understand the decisions in your life and where you're choosing comfort over the uncomfortable, and some different aspects. So for a more deep dive in that, go listen to last week's episode. But essentially, it comes down to that self-awareness and that knowing of, when am I choosing the comfortable and when am I choosing the uncomfortable, and how can I ensure that I'm choosing the uncomfortable? Now, does choosing the uncomfortable mean that you're always going to be miserable? No, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean always do the super sucky thing that's going to make your life horrible. No, that's not at all the point. It doesn't mean push yourself and hustle nonstop and never rest. No, not what it means. I'm a big fan of rest. And the main reason is because it's something I struggle with. I'm not good at letting myself rest and unwind. I feel like I always got to be productive in doing things. That's why I'm so big about talking on it, because I know that struggle. That's not what it means. What it does mean is that looking at the decisions you're making in your life, all the way down to the very little things, little day-to-day decisions all the time, and evaluating, am I choosing the comfortable? Am I choosing the uncomfortable? Am I choosing to not go work out just because I don't feel like it? Or am I choosing it because I know I need to rest? Am I choosing to eat unhealthy because it's easier? Or am I having an intentional, like, okay, and look, this is totally a person to person thing, because some people, especially people who have had like sugar addiction and that sort of thing, they don't even want to touch it. Right. I was talking to a lady the other day who she just lost 150 pounds, and she wouldn't even take one little piece of chocolate because she didn't want to risk anything. It's the same thing with people with alcohol and, any of that sort of thing. I understand that. I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is, like, I don't think it's wrong to every now and then have a fast food burger or to have a bowl of ice cream or whatever. Nothing against that. But everything comes down to intentionality at the end of the day. And this is something I want to take a deeper dive into on a further podcast episode. So I'm just going to briefly touch on it right now. But essentially, it comes down to that intentionality and knowing your motives behind the thing. Are you choosing the unhealthy food just because it's easier and it's quick, or it's on the way home? I don't feel like, taking the extra 20 minutes to cook that chicken or whatever it is. You know what I mean? The healthier option. Or are you choosing it because, okay, today is the one day a week I'm going to let myself do this, out of intentionality. So that's the second, essentially, way to help you is self-awareness. And through that self-awareness, that will help you become more intentional. And then it comes down to action, and it comes down to actually making it happen and to doing the things, like, for example, I can't tell you how many times I use working out a lot because that's just a big thing for me. That's a big passion of mine. I love health. I love wellness. I love that fitness. And so that's an analogy I use a lot, but you can apply this to anything in your life. But a lot of the time, I will not want to work out. I will be tired. I will be worn out. For example, this morning, I was feeling really I felt good going into it, but then when I got there, I felt really lazy. I felt tired. I'd still been fasting, doing intermittent fasting, and I had not ate yet. So I was just like, man, I feel weak. I feel fatigued. I could just go home. I got a podcast episode I got to go record. I got limited time today. I got a lot of stuff to do. Um, I don't want to be doing this. But then I said, you know what? That's not practicing what I preach. Buckled up my chin strap and I got to work, and I ended up having a really good workout. Was it the best workout I've ever had? No. But like I said earlier, even a bad workout is better than not doing anything at all. And I really do believe that. And I believe that when we push ourselves and when we take action on that, that is diving into the uncomfortable. And that is how we live that fulfilled life. Because had I given up and say, you know what, it's fine, I'm just tired, I'm just going to go home. It's fine. I don't really feel like doing this today. I guarantee you that would have impacted the rest of my day. That would have impacted the way I would have felt about myself. I would have felt like kind of weak today. I would have felt just a little bit down and out about myself, a little disappointed. But it all compounds, if that makes sense. So had I maybe not given it all in that given it my all in that workout, that might have then translated over to this podcast. And that might have then translated over to any other work I do today. And that might have then translated over into the quality time I spend with my wife this weekend. And, it all compounds. But if I'm giving it my all there, now granted, you can't give it your all everywhere, but that's not the point. The point is that when you're pushing yourself, you're building that resilience. And through building that resilience and getting more uncomfortable, it impacts every area of your life. And really, you can only improve that way. So that's just sort of an overarching way, an overarching look of how you can get more uncomfortable is by first understanding, having the self-awareness, through the self-awareness, then building and focusing on those intentions and your intentions behind everything, and then acting on it. Because once you have the self-awareness and once you have your intentions set in place, that provides you the perfect path to act and to get uncomfortable. So whatever it is, no matter how big it is, whether it's just the little day-to-day decisions, like I said, like what you're gonna eat, if you're gonna go work out or not, if you're gonna, the conversations that you have, whatever it is, whether it's the little things like that, or whether it's the big decisions, like maybe you're deciding to leave school or to quit your corporate job or to stay at your corporate job or to whatever it is, right? I hope that you choose the uncomfortable. I hope that you follow what your gut says, what your intuition says, because it won't lead you astray. Take the risks, calculated risks. Don't be stupid, okay? But don't be afraid to take a risk. Don't be afraid to get uncomfortable, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because that is how we get uncomfortable, and that is that's how we live a fulfilled life. So, anyways, yeah, that's essentially just where the name came from, of Into the Uncomfortable podcast. I'm just a big fan of getting uncomfortable. I love it. And I really believe that if more and more people were to get uncomfortable and to live an uncomfortable life, you'd see so much more happiness and joy and fulfillment in the world. Because I know for me in my own life, when I'm pushing myself and breaking out of those comfort zones, that's when I feel that fulfillment and that joy myself. But anyways, yeah, that's about all that I got for you on this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. So, anyways, next week we're going to be diving into what's holding you back. I talked a bit about how I've started Into the Uncomfortable and everything behind that, and how starting something can be uncomfortable. But now we're going to talk about what's holding you back from starting, because many of us have that thing that's in our head. We have that thing in our minds that we want to start, that we want to chase after, that we want to pursue. We all have different passions and different wants and desires, and whatever it may be for you, whether you're wanting to start a business or a podcast or a blog yourself or whatever it may be, or maybe you're wanting to learn something new. Maybe you're wanting to make a career change. Maybe you're just trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. Whatever it is, we all have things we want to start, want to learn, want to do. But oftentimes we get held back. And so next week, we're going to be diving into what is holding you back and how to stop it and break through it, so you can start diving into the uncomfortable and stepping into a fulfilled life. But that is all for this episode. Thank you all so much for joining, for tuning in, for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, as always, please leave us a subscribe. If I could talk, that'd be awesome. Please leave us a subscribe, like, comment your favorite takeaway, and turn on that little bell notification so you can be the first to know when a new episode is released. If you're listening on one of the major streaming platforms such as Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you so happen to get your podcasts, leave us a subscribe on there as well, please, and especially a rating and review. This helps us a lot with rankings and all that sort of thing, and helps us to spread the message of diving into the uncomfortable and living this fulfilled life. So anyways, if you got value from this episode, I ask that you please share it with someone that also could gain value from it. And always feel free to reach out. Any feedback, any takeaways, anything that's especially resonated with you, or anything you disagree with. I'm always down for any sort of a conversation. In addition, speaking of, I'm always looking for guests. So if you want to dive into some uncomfortable topics, we're going to have some new guest episodes coming out in April. You can be one of them coming out soon. If that's you, if that's something you'd be interested in, reach out to me. You can shoot me a DM on Instagram at IntoTheUncomfortable or shoot me an email, jake@IntoTheUncomfortable.com. So anyways, that's all I've got for you guys on this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. If you've listened this far, thank you so much. Truly means the world. Appreciate all of you and all your support. Can't wait to chat with you on the next one, all about what's holding you back. Anyways, go make the most of your day, of your week, and go find one way to take an actionable step on your goals and dreams and to dive into the uncomfortable. Until next time, keep on diving. What's up, guys? Jake here again. Just wanted to thank you real quick for listening to this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I ask that you would please go leave us a rating or review wherever you're listening to this. Really helps us out, really helps us tell more people about the uncomfortable and to help more people live fulfilled lives. So if you could go take 2 seconds to go do that, that would mean the world. Now go take one actionable step towards your dreams today and to apply what you heard here on this episode. You got this. I'm rooting for you as always. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Uncomfortable Podcast.
Take yourself out your comfort zone. If you want to be ordinary, you ain't even got to listen to me.
Comfort is overrated. We've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.